Bravo Delta 50 to Bravo Delta 60. Are you ready to roll up?
Yes, ready.
Received. Let's go, Joe. Let's go.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is the very first scene from Adolescence, a British limited series on Netflix. Now, because we've got no fewer than 6 police vehicles and the cops are wielding assault rifles in a country where guns are heavily regulated, you may think that they're breaking down the door of a terror suspect or weapons dealer. But no, this is all to arrest one Jamie Miller, a 13-year-old boy who has been accused of murdering his classmate Katie Leonard with a knife. And as we all know, the police rule is to maintain a strict 8 assault rifles to 1 knife ratio. It's very important. While the first of the 4-episode series has the look and feel of a true crime mystery, that's not really what Adolescence is. Because by the end of the first episode, we find out that Jamie was caught doing the crime in 4K. You thought the police were overreacting with that SWAT team, but it turns out actually, they were completely justified. Because Jamie is a cold-blooded murderer. I bet you feel silly now. You see, that's not piss running down his leg, it's cold blood. Also, I'm sorry for the spoilers. I'm not really sorry. But according to creator Jack Thorne, it's not really a spoiler, because this show isn't really a detective story at all.
Adolescence is not a whodunit, it's a whydunit. How did this boy end up in this place?
Each of the series' 4 episodes is shot in one interrupted take and follows the fallout of the crime from different angles. The first is Jamie's arrest, the second is the school investigation, the third is Jamie's psych evaluation, and the final episode follows his family a year after the incident. Throughout the course of the show, we learn that Jamie has been radicalized by the internet. Things like the red pill, the manosphere, incels, and alleged sex criminal Andrew Tate. Misogynist content creators who tell boys that all of their problems are really the fault of women.
But I said that if a woman is going out with a man, she belongs to that man. That's his woman. So if she wants to do OnlyFans, she owes him some money because she's his. Yes, that's what I said.
Well, that's crazy.
You think if a
that
man,
one's crazy.
You think that a man going out with a girl that's just your property? There can't be an equal relationship?
No, that one was nuts.
When even a sex pest like Dave Portnoy is telling you to chill out, you've probably gone a bit too far. It's hard to overstate just how big of a deal Adolescence has become in the UK. It became the first streaming show to ever top the UK's weekly TV ratings, and as of June 2025, it was the second most popular English-language Netflix series of all time, coming in just behind Wednesday, which is apparently a show that people are watching. I wouldn't know. There are no cops in it. Maybe there are. I don't know. Is Wednesday copaganda? Should that be my next video? Who knows?
Galpin? I know you're lurking somewhere in this suburban squalor. I need you to tell me about your case.
Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, can't stop talking about how important he thinks Adolescence is, writing an op-ed in the most popular newspaper in the country, inviting the creators to Downing Street to talk about how to protect children, and making the groundbreaking series free for schools in order to spark a conversation. And that conversation seems like a genuinely pretty good thing. Dozens of think pieces have used the show to open dialogues between teens and their parents, to highlight systemic issues around violence against women, to discuss the rise of online misogyny, and figure out how we can save young boys from falling down these pipelines in the first place. New guidelines from the Labour Party have aimed to teach students to express and understand boundaries, to handle disappointment, to understand consent, and to recognize power dynamics in both romantic and sexual relationships. But at the same time, Adolescence plays into a number of crime narratives, issues that are real but are exaggerated or distorted in public discourse for political ends. Most notably, it has fueled support for the Online Safety Act, a sweeping piece of legislation that blocks and monitors harmful material online in the name of child safety, and has also been heavily criticized for its effect on privacy and censorship, as well as its incredibly imprecise tactics. So, can this show really save boys? Are boys even really in need of saving? Or is Adolescence more about stoking a number of fears that have been simmering in the UK for years? Welcome to Copaganda, a series of videos exploring the portrayal of the police on television and how that portrayal has shaped our understanding of who the police are and what they should be. That's right, we're back, baby! After 6 months of shitting on the West Wing, it's time to get back to my bread and butter. Maybe you thought I'd run out of content, but it turns out they just keep making shows about the police. There's a playlist of the whole copaganda series around here somewhere. Today, in a kind of spiritual sequel to my video last year about To Catch a Predator, we're going to travel across the pond for a very special episode of Copaganda. You have all been begging me for years to cover the Brits, and today, your wishes have come true. I truly am a man of the people. While the police in the UK might not gun down civilians in the streets at the same rate that they do in the States, covering them presents its own challenges. I mean, do you know how hard it is to take you Brits seriously when everyone is named Dame or Lord or Sir? We're not even talking about a gun murder. This is a knife murder. Your judges wear wigs. I mean, shit, I read a report from a woman named Baroness Casey where she said that the London police were institutionally racist, sexist, misogynistic, and homophobic, and pretty much all mainstream government officials were like, yeah, they agreed with her. What is this, the fucking Twilight Zone? Now look, am I qualified to talk about British crime panics as an American? I don't know, but that's never stopped a YouTuber before. And it certainly did not stop Alex Garland from making a terrible movie about American politics and photojournalism without opening a single book on either topic first. I really did not care for Civil War, but that's also why I called up some experts.
I mean, I've researched policing issues for years, really, and there's a lot of the kind of official institutions of police inspection, police complaints, police conduct management. It always talks, we are a learning organisation. They go on.
Yeah.
To which my reply is, yes, but you're also a forgetting organisation.
Child safety, again, is a blanket term, but really when you're listening to media coverage or listening to politicians and regulators talking about the issue, they're very much responding to this like spectacle of child sexual abuse. Which again, child sexual
you
abuse
mentioned
is
Jimmy
part
Savile
of the
earlier.
Broader,
yeah,
exactly. It's part of the child safety issue, of course, but that's actually it requires specific set of interventions.
That's Peter Squires and Kate Sim. We'll be hearing from them more a little bit later in the episode to talk about British crime and about what the government is doing to address the issues raised in the show. While Adolescence isn't a cop show in the traditional sense, I think we can learn a lot from this show about the ways in which narratives about crime shape police policy. So let's dive into Adolescence. What does it have to say about crime and the internet? What policies is the show being used to promote? And what should we do about all these dang boys?
I also wrote down that I wanted to talk to you about what being a man feels like.
You want to cock and balls, do you?
I'm interested in what being a man feels like for you.
I'm going to use the term boy problems to talk about the gendered issues that Adolescence has sparked conversation about, because depending on how you look at it, they're both problems caused by and inflicted upon boys. Also, I just really love Carly Rae Jepsen's iconic 2015 song of the same name. Turns out we all do, Carly. The boys, they have problems, and now it's our problem too. The biggest, flashiest thing Adolescence has done is shed light on the existence and particulars of internet misogyny. There are truly just so many pieces in major publications trying to explain the specific terms used on the show, which is very silly, because the show pretty explicitly explains all of them.
Red Pill's like, I see the truth. It's a call to action by the manosphere. 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. That's what they say. You're an incel. You're gonna be, a virgin forever.
Wild to watch the show and then go on to, like, Paste magazine and be like, I wonder what Red Pill is. What has happened to journalism? Jamie's particular beliefs within the manosphere context are hard to nail down. He claims not to subscribe to the entire ideology of the manosphere.
Are you part of those?
No.
But you know what they say?
Yeah, because everyone kept on going on about with incel stuff, so I had a look, but I didn't like it.
But he also calls them truth groups, and does seem to believe in some of it pretty strongly.
What's an 80-20 thing?
Where 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. I do think they're right about that, though.
Now, I'm not going to spend time debunking each and every one of these manosphere claims because there are truly so many people who have done this already on YouTube. And frankly, it seems kind of tedious and boring to me since they're all patently absurd beliefs.
All cheating scenarios 100% the blame is always on the female.
Instead, I want to talk about the larger themes of the misogynistic ideology the show touches on. While hating women has been popular ever since Eve took a bite of that apple, this version of online misogyny is a reactionary movement that sees the relative gains of feminism and the sexual revolution and calls for a return to a traditional hierarchy of men and women. Both in the show and online, you can see misogynists understanding dating as a naturally occurring hierarchy of sexual marketplace value. To them, everyone has a fixed place in the social hierarchy. And that means that if you are low on that totem pole, you're going to have to resort to tricks in order to find a romantic or sexual partner.
I don't know what you're talking about. Just break it down.
80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. Woman, you must trick them because you'll never get them in a normal way.
Can you think of a single time tricks have ever gotten a dude to date? Do this for me. Close your eyes and imagine a guy doing magic tricks in a bar to try to pick up women. Did it work? Is he getting laid right now?
So, this is the magic trick, huh?
Illusion, Michael. Trick is something a whore does for money. Or candy.
Despite allegedly being a big, strong, tough guy ideology, this is an understanding of the world that I can only describe as rom-com brain. Manufacturing some kind of elaborate meet-cute scenario rather than, like, talking to a girl like she's a human being. Groundbreaking. I know, it's great advice. I can probably start my own self-help skip intro academy. Misogynists hate this one trick of talking to people like they're people. But this is a problem for the manosphere folks because they don't see women as equals. They believe in a natural power hierarchy between men and women. And I think it's easy to see why this pitch is appealing, especially to boys going through adolescence. Hey, that's the name of the show. I don't think that this should be news to anyone, but puberty, it kinda sucks. You're dealing with rejection for the first time in your life and a level of shame that would make a Catholic nun with an eating disorder blush. That pain of adolescence is ripe for the manosphere to pick off boys, offering community in a simple narrative that this pain is the fault of those pesky women with their rights and autonomy. But this also means that nothing is more threatening to them than feeling like they're at the bottom of that hierarchy. Jamie is a perfect example of this. We learned that before her death, Katie sent a nude photo to a classmate, which then was circulated to the rest of the school, humiliating her. Jamie sees this as an opportunity he wouldn't have otherwise had. This is a moment where her value has fallen within his reach.
It's clever, don't you think?
To ask her out when everyone else didn't like her.
Well, I went round and said I was sorry and everything. That fidget was a wanker. And I said I'd take her to the fair if she liked.
Her weakness made her more gettable, was your theory?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder why she didn't like that, dude. Literally worked for every single man on the West Wing. What an awful fucking show. Watch my videos about it. Jamie's plan obviously backfires, and that failure makes him feel powerless, something that is compounded when Katie then calls him an incel online. This is what ultimately drives Jamie to kill her. This male insecurity about women having any power at all is laid pretty bare by the end of that third episode. Throughout, Jamie tries to play power games with his evaluator. He uses outbursts of anger to intimidate her.
Look out! Fucking wanna sit down! You do not tell me when to sit down!
Using irony and sarcasm to mask aggression, like he's a little Twitter groiper.
Did I scare you when I shouted?
She wrote this on your
I mean, I'm only 13. I don't think I look that scary.
This anger is even explicitly directed at the power she has in this situation and his feeling of powerlessness.
What was that? Hey? What the fuck was that? Signal away like a fucking queen, yeah?
But the show also, quite artfully in my opinion, does not depict this as a problem unique to Jamie or even his generation of young boys. The security guard who interacts with the evaluator throughout the course of the episode makes a number of comments indicating that he feels less powerful than her, and that he doesn't like it very much. It always feels like he's about to ask her to just smile.
I can do what you do.
I'm sure I couldn't do what you do.
Do you want a job swap? What's your hours? What's your wages? What's your holiday allowances?
No, I like my job most of the time.
Well, I hate mine.
I think that the show does a genuinely very good job identifying and depicting the power dynamics at the heart of misogyny. And whereas we in the States have been busy pretending that Donald Trump is the embodiment of masculine energy, it is genuinely heartwarming to see the UK government embrace the show's message that misogyny is a public safety threat. In the last 2 years, there has been a massive push in the UK to address what they call violence against women and girls. It's such a talking point that they even have a nifty acronym for it, VAWG, which, like all good acronyms, takes just as long to say as the thing it's abbreviating. Unless you said VOG, which would be weird. Don't do that. Sounds like a tag on fan fiction. Last year, Metro UK launched a year-long campaign called This Is Not Right, dedicated to non-stop coverage of violence against women. And The Guardian even tracked every single woman killed by a man in 2024, with blurbs on all 80 of them. Wait, is that right? 80 women? Yes. You heard me right. While obviously every death is a tragedy, we are talking about a country with a population over 69 million. It's actually wild how few people are killed over there. The entirety of England and Wales only have roughly 570 homicides a year total. That is a total murder rate of 9.5 per 1 million. For comparison, the US has a homicide rate of 68 per 1 million. I mean, shit, 802 people have already died this year in the US from police violence that we know of. Maybe you're onto something with this whole gun control thing. Is that how I think that's how you say it. Of course, violence against women is much more than just homicide. Numbers from the Office of National Statistics indicate 3.3% of women aged 16 and over were a victim of sexual assault in the past year. According to reporting from The Guardian, nearly 70% of rape victims drop out of investigations due to a lengthy court process that leaves thousands of cases outstanding, social pressure to withdraw, not wanting to relive the trauma in court, and because it's unlikely to result in any kind of conviction. Only 1% of reported rapes in the UK lead to convictions, which is not great. I'm sure this has absolutely nothing to do with Baroness Casey's report that found the police to be institutionally misogynistic and sexist, and racist, and homophobic. Her words, not mine. The Center for Women's Justice has taken the testimony of hundreds of women who have been victimized by the police, and nearly half of them are other cops. They report that the accused officer often retaliated by criminalizing them, and that those counter cases were investigated more rigorously. If they're doing that to other cops, imagine what they're doing to people who don't have the power to speak up. But while the police and courts rarely ever deliver justice to women, Adolescence gives off the exact opposite impression. Like I said, each episode is filmed in one long take, which is meant to make everything feel a bit more dramatic and intense, but it also serves the role of making the police seem like they operate with fairy tale efficiency. If we follow the timeline of the show, Katie Leonard is murdered at 10:13 p.m.
Incident took place at 10:13 p.m. last night.
By 6:15 a.m., almost exactly 8 hours later, in the middle of the night, the police have gathered enough CCTV evidence to obtain a warrant, organize a SWAT raid, and carry out an arrest.
The time is 6:15 a.m. and I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder.
By 6:31 a.m., Jamie has already been detained and processed by the police.
Okay, it's 6:31, authorizing your detention.
Just 22 minutes after the battering ram hits his front door, and 10 minutes after Jamie asks for a lawyer.
And will you be wanting a solicitor?
Yeah.
He gets one. The police have even somehow found time to pull Jamie's school transcripts in the middle of the night and review them in preparation for their interview.
I've been reading your school reports.
Why?
I got your teachers to send them over.
And we all know how much the police love doing paperwork. I mean, honestly, how could they have possibly gotten all that done so fast? It leaves almost no time to play Candy Crush. While the show definitely leads us to believe that the initial raid and invasiveness of the arrest are overkill, the episode proves us wrong and the police right. Jamie's defense lawyer even has this absolutely bonkers line.
I think the police have some pretty compelling evidence. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to ask for blood. They wouldn't have been able to make the entrance that they did. Now, I don't know what that evidence is, but I'm pretty sure it's going to become clear to us very soon.
Of course. What was I thinking? The police would never be overly aggressive, and if it seems that way, they probably have a very good reason. While it's good that the government identifies violence against women as a problem that needs to be addressed, it's hard to take them that seriously when every proposed solution is about increasing spending on a police system that actively ignores and commits this kind of violence, while budget cuts have led to many domestic abuse shelters closing or having to be turned into charities.
So women's refuge and rape crisis centres are really struggling to continue in the context of diminishing state support. It's become much more charitably based, and lots have had to close, and so there's a real crisis there, even as the whole policy issue about violence against women and girls, which has pretty much been focused on getting the police to do it better.
Yeah. Rather than depict the systemic failures of the London police to address misogynistic violence, Adolescence opts to center the plight of boys in the conversation, focusing on the ways in which society is failing them and leaving misogyny as their only refuge. While misogyny is bad for women, obviously, it's also bad for men, and not just because they occasionally end up in prison. A 2025 meta-analysis published in the American Journal of Men's Health found that traditional masculinity norms significantly deter men from seeking mental health support. Directly tied to that, men are 3 times more likely to become dependent on alcohol, report frequent drug use, and to die by suicide than women. That is to say, it's pretty clear that expanding our definition of masculinity beyond traditional boundaries is good for everyone, making it okay for boys to do things that have been historically frowned upon for real men. I'm talking about things like asking for help, crying, being vulnerable, doing the dishes, grooming yourself, or listening to Carly Rae Jepsen. Seriously, boys, you're really missing out. Try being mad at women when you hear that saxophone at the beginning of Run Away With Me. It's so good. It's also pretty clear that school is a great place to intervene. It's where young people go through puberty, and it's where they construct their own gender identity, and it's where they are most open to new ideas. There's evidence that traditional beliefs about masculinity correlate to worse academic performance and mental health, both for boys and for girls, and that more blended patterns of masculinity correlate to less misogyny and less homophobia. But school-based interventions also present some gender-specific challenges for boys. Since the mid-90s, we've been aware that comparable behavior is more likely to be punished in boys than in girls. Boys often struggle with the structure of school itself. A 2023 article in the American Psychological Association noted, at the biological level, boys are at higher risk for inattention, hyperactivity, and externalizing behaviors. Classrooms, meanwhile, typically require students to sit quietly and self-regulate, what some call the sit-and-get approach to education. When boys struggle with that, getting out of their seat or ignoring teachers' instructions, for example, they are often punished for it. Another barrier for boys is that the vast majority of teachers are women, and that male role models tend to come from other industries, like athletics, business, and entertainment, rather than academia. And scholars have theorized that this tells boys that doing well in school is for girls. So, we have a situation where boys struggle to sit still, are punished disproportionately for acting out, and often that punishment comes from a woman. And then a reactionary movement that thrives on that frustration. This is part of the reason why the British Education Secretary recently called for more male teachers, to offset this kind of implicit bias. This speech from football manager Gareth Southgate became national news in March, where he advocated for better male role models who can teach boys that it's okay to fail, and creating a place where it's okay for them to cry or ask for help.
As real-world communities and mentorship declines, young men end up withdrawing, reluctant to talk or express their emotions. They spend more time online searching for direction, and are falling into unhealthy alternatives like gaming, gambling, and pornography. And this void is filled by a new kind of role model who do not have the best interests at heart. They willingly trick young men into believing that success is measured by money or dominance, never showing emotion, and that the world, including women, is against them. They are as far away as you could possibly get from the role models our young men need in their lives.
But I think that male role models can only do so much, since adult men often end up perpetuating these same gender norms. After all, they grew up under these same social pressures, even when they realized that those were harmful. We can see this on full display in Adolescence. While Jamie's father wants to be better than his own father was, and has sworn to never hit his kids the way he was hit.
When I was his age, my dad used to fucking batter me. Sometimes he'd take the belt to me and he'd fucking whack me, and he'd whack me. I said, when I had my own kids, I'd never do that. I just wanted to be better.
He still ends up pushing his conception of masculinity onto his son, trying to toughen him up with football and boxing. Jamie does well in school and likes history and drawing, rather than excelling at sports.
You're not into sport?
No.
None of it?
Yeah, I'm not good at much, but I'm really good at getting out of PE.
In fact, his lack of athleticism is a bit of a point of shame for both him and his father.
He used to take me to football. He'd cheer me on and everything, but when I'd fuck up, he'd just look away.
I took him to footy, didn't I? Because I thought it'd soften him up. Nobody was crap. I just stood there on the side of the pitch while all the other dads were laughing at him. And I could feel him looking at me. And I couldn't look at him, man. I couldn't look at me homeboy.
So when Jamie fails at sports, it sends a message to him that he is not tough, that he is failing at being a man, which makes him understandably kind of defensive.
How did you feel when you saw that? Shame?
You're supposed to say he wasn't.
Am I?
Yeah. You're supposed to say, oh, I bet he wasn't ashamed. Bet he just thought that, Jamie. Oh, but is that what you really think? He wouldn't be ashamed, not of his kid.
Have other people said that to you?
It's just the right thing to say.
As a result, Jamie feels the need to overcompensate, trying to perform an expectation of gender that he doesn't even fully understand himself.
One of them touched my knob through my trousers, and I think she liked it.
And you liked it?
Of course. Not really.
You didn't like it?
I don't know. Yeah. That didn't happen.
You weren't touched on your trousers?
No, I wasn't.
It's these expectations of who boys should be that's holding them back, trying to fit them into a one-size-fits-all box labeled man that has no space for difference. But it also strikes me as a little counterproductive to, on the one hand, tell boys that masculinity doesn't have to just be one thing and you can cry and ask for help and do things that have traditionally been considered more feminine, essentially blurring gender norms, while also rigidly enforcing different gender norms. You see, I was once a young boy. Shocking, I know. And boys, they fucking suck.
Just got banged by a girl, you sausage.
When I was a kid, we used to call anything that wasn't masculine gay, and liberally use the F slur. Today, queerness has become a bit more normalized, but we can see that same dynamic at play, just in a slightly different location on the gender sexuality spectrum. Earlier this year, the British Supreme Court ruled that trans women aren't women. And while Prime Minister Keir Starmer used to support trans people, he has since done a complete 180 and agreed with that ruling. He said he respects the views of arguably the most famous TERF in the world, and scolded actor David Tennant for telling a transphobe to shut up. He even recently said that, "I'm not in favor of ideology being taught in our schools on gender," which makes it kind of strange that he's advocating for Adolescence to be shown to kids. I mean, it's literally about the ways in which we construct gender. Like, what do you think misogyny is about if it's not about gender? Hate crimes against trans people have skyrocketed in recent years, and the Home Office, which is the UK's interior ministry and not some weird combo of Home Depot Office Max, even admitted that this crime wave has been fueled by the speech of politicians. I don't think it's a reach to look at the assault on trans and queer people as an extension of this same misogyny. Jamie himself pretty clearly sees queerness as a whole as a threat to his own masculinity.
What do you think about women?
I like them.
But you're not, like you say, particularly friends with them?
I'm not a twat, though.
Are you attracted to women?
Yeah, I'm not gay.
While creator Jack Thorne was in part inspired to write Adolescence by the murder of trans teen Brianna Gay, and has claimed that he privately challenged J.K. Rowling on her transphobic beliefs, he's also backtracked a bit himself, saying in 2022 that despite having a close friend who is trans, I don't doubt it's a really, really complicated argument, and I don't doubt that there's a lot of nuance to everyone's position. I do. I doubt it. I doubt that there's nuance to transphobia. I think they just feel uncomfortable at the existence of trans people. Still, if all Adolescence was doing was sparking conversations around gender, this video probably wouldn't be part of copaganda. No, Adolescence and the discourse around it is being used to push one of the most wide-sweeping laws in British history.
But he was in his room, weren't he? You know, we thought he was safe, didn't we? Yeah. Didn't we think he was safe? What harm can he do in there? Thought we were doing the right thing.
By the time we meet Jamie Miller, he's already been radicalized by online misogyny, unbeknownst to his family. The message of the show seems to send a pretty classic message to adults and parents. You don't know what your kids are up to right under your noses.
You're not reading what they're doing. What's happening?
What are you talking about?
Insta.
That's because at the heart of Adolescence is a fear of the internet and the things that children are exposed to through it. Creator Jack Thorne has been pretty outspoken that he sees social media as the central threat facing boys and really all children. He told the BBC that we do believe perhaps the answer to this is in Parliament and legislating, and taking kids away from their phones in school and taking kids away from social media altogether. While Adolescence has certainly opened dialogues around misogyny and gendered violence, the most concrete policies emerging from these conversations is a call to restrict social media, the internet, and smartphones for children. Of course, Adolescence didn't start this conversation. In the past year, for example, high-profile tragedies like the Hunt family murders and the Prosper family murders have rocked the nation, and prosecutors in both cases have pointed to radicalizing online content as a motivating factor, fueling calls for social media bans and stricter surveillance. 2 weeks before Adolescence premiered, The Guardian published an article titled "Extreme Online Violence May Be Linked to the Rise of 0 to 100 Killers, Experts Say." And 3 months before that, "Pick and Mix of Horror Online Pushes Young People to Violence, UK Police Chief Says." Both of these stories quote terrorism cops, who essentially argue that any normal person could be browsing the internet and suddenly find themselves radicalized by extreme content, for seemingly no rhyme or reason. And I think we've all been there, right? You're alone in your room browsing Reddit, and then all of a sudden you get a pop-up ad for a beheading video, and you try to click out of it, but it's got one of those X buttons that moves around on you, and by the time you get it closed, you've already seen the beheading, and you've gotten the taste for human blood, and you just need more! Scientists call it digital vampirism. Or at least they should. You know, if that was a real thing. Prime Minister Keir Starmer echoed this sentiment in his op-ed on Adolescence, writing, "It's clear that one of the greatest dangers to young people today isn't on our streets. It's in the home. If children can access corners of the internet that glorify violence and encourage hatred in their bedrooms, there is nowhere they are safe." This overture to child protection has largely been used by politicians to sell the British Online Safety Act, which was passed in 2023 and went into full effect in July 2025. The Labour Party's 2024 manifesto says explicitly, children and young people face significant harm online with inappropriate content too easily available at their fingertips on a smartphone. We have seen an increase in extreme misogynistic content online, driving a culture of violence against women. Labour will build on the Online Safety Act, bringing forward provisions as quickly as possible, and explore further measures to keep everyone safe online, particularly when using social media. Now, what's wrong with that, you might be asking? Surely, there's stuff on the internet that kids probably should not be exposed to, right? I mean, I can think of a few things. You got pornography, self-harm content, anti-vax content, QAnon stuff, Serbian films, the John Birch Society. What makes this issue even more confusing to engage with is that some really bizarre coalitions have emerged, both supporting and opposing the Online Safety Act. In support, you have both the Liberal Labour Party and the Conservative Tory Party that originally pitched the bill. In opposition, you've got far-right figures like Nigel Frogman Farage, but you've also got the LGBTQ community and pro-Palestine protesters, who fear that a crackdown on free speech will inevitably hit them first.
So I think because of this coalition, it ends up being really difficult to have a conversation because I think all members feel it as a high stake thing. And it is a high stakes thing because we are talking about child safety, but then it kind of ends up being a stand-in for a lot of these other anxieties about young people, anxieties about technology, anxieties about like generational misunderstandings and conflict and so on. So it ends up feeling like an impasse.
That's Dr. Kate Sim, the director of the research program COSPER, which stands for Children's Online Safety and Privacy. Because the Online Safety Act is so massive and the discourse around it is so confusing, I called her to help guide me through it.
The UK Online Safety Act is what I see to be kind of part of a suite of laws from a number of different jurisdictions that are touting to be for young people's safety online. The concern, however, is that Online Safety Act, along with other jurisdictions, are taking a very blunt, heavy-handed approach that I've been kind of referring to as a form of digital abstinence, of basically saying, you know, bad things are happening to kids online, so let's just prevent them from accessing the online spaces, which to me is on par with things like, you know, banning sex education and book banning in the past.
Now, to be clear, I totally understand why parents are concerned about young people's safety online. The internet is changing at such a rapid rate that it's quickly leaving older generations behind. I mean, I'm not even that old and TikTok freaks me out. And this is all blending with a lot of very traditional parental anxieties. When kids grow up, they become more independent, and that can be really scary for parents. After having carefully watched your kid for their entire life, it can be terrifying to think that you might not know everything that they're up to. Again, we talked about this a bit in the episode last year on To Catch a Predator. I think most people probably agree that there is some harmful content that shouldn't be easily accessible to kids. But I also think that people don't realize how difficult it might be to define those terms.
When you first hear these things, you're like, well, yeah, those things sound harmful, but actually it's really hard just looking at the content alone to distinguish between like people who are engaging with, let's say, self-harm content because they're seeking support and they're looking for a community versus, people who are generating really, harmful instructions about really damaging behaviors. And when we say young people, are we talking about like 6 and 7-year-olds watching YouTube Kids, or are we talking about developmentally, normatively horny teenagers who are curious and looking things up and they're aged like 16 to 18? But of course, under the eyes of the law, they're really only looking at minors, and there's no distinction between a 6-year-old versus 16-year-old, even though their developmental needs are different.
For something ostensibly about protecting children, the Online Safety Act has a lot of other stuff in it that it outlines as illegal harms. For example, the very first priority offense isn't related to children at all. It's terrorism. Ofcom, the enforcement arm of the Online Safety Act, gives really vague guidelines on this kind of stuff too, writing that this includes information that is likely to provide practical assistance to a person committing or preparing an act of terrorism. You might be thinking, that could kind of be anything. Like, don't terrorists use maps? Are maps illegal now? Great question. Here's what Ofcom says. Content that may be useful to a terrorist, but which also has clear innocuous uses. For example, a map or public transport information is not usually in and of itself information likely to be of use to a terrorist. However, if in context such public information is used specifically for terrorist purposes, for example, if a person posts a map with a target for terrorist attack marked on it, or transport information relating specifically on how to get to a targeted location or person, it becomes information likely to be of use to a terrorist. So, it's really vibes based. So just don't circle anything on a map, I guess, that anybody would want to attack. Unlawful immigration is another priority offense, including encouraging or assisting an illegal entry. Sounds vague again, but let's check their examples. Oh, cool. They didn't give any examples due to bad actors constantly evolving their tactics. Today, users in the UK need to issue a government ID or get their face scanned in order to view not safe for work subreddits, and also a number of other controversial ones. Okay, surely this is where they've required age verification for all those misogyny subreddits they keep talking about, like men's rights or Red Pill and others associated with that. No, that's not where they started.
I have my VPN set to London. I want to go to Israel
exposed. And okay, I have to verify my birthday. Then it sends you to this page. So either my photo ID or you can do a selfie, which involves some kind of biometric scan of your face from left to right, which is kind of crazy. It says that they will process your bioinformation and store it for up to 7 days, which feels a lot longer than they would need to. But don't worry, they'll definitely get rid of it after that. They pinky promise. This comes along with a ban of the group Palestine Action from the internet altogether, which human rights groups have called a threat to public debate. How is this keeping children safe again? Or more importantly, which children are being kept safe this way?
I mean, I think it's worth noting that the most vocal advocacy groups that claim to represent the interests of children have not said a single word about Palestinian children. Or the children in the Congo, or a number of horrific violence against children that we're seeing live streamed on our devices every day. And I think part of it is because child protection sector is actually, there's a child rights people who are working in the kind of broad space of the welfare of the children, but particularly the child protection sector, protection specifically around child sexual abuse and sex trafficking is actually a very small subset of the broader child rights and child welfare community. And that child protection sector has had a long-standing willingness to work with and partnership with law enforcement. There is a global trend, particularly in these Commonwealth countries, where they have a history of using the language of public safety to police and surveil particularly Black and Brown communities, and particularly politically defending communities.
And it's not hard to see the harms of this increased surveillance. Police are notorious for abusing surveillance tools to harass, stalk, and have sex with women under false pretenses. Despite claiming to delete those face scans, big tech has historically been exceedingly cooperative with police. Amazon passed video from their Ring doorbells to the police without their owner's consent or a warrant for years. While Mark Zuckerberg promised employees that his company would use encryption to keep people safe in the fallout of the Dobbs decision that functionally made abortion illegal in dozens of states, Meta turned over DMs between a 17-year-old and her mother, which led to her arrest. The Online Safety Act also demands backdoor access to end-to-end encrypted messages, which the European Court of Human Rights has ruled cannot be regarded as necessary in a democratic society. But what about a fascist one? Ooh?
Actually, if you want to address the issue of child sexual abuse, like, private communication is not the place to start. Encryption isn't a selective thing. It's an all or nothing. You either have encryption or you don't. You can just selectively break it. And of course, breaking it means that it's going to subject so many people, particularly those in authoritarian regimes. And that's not something that happens like far away. We're literally living in, like with the ICE raids and everything, we're seeing authoritarian policing happening in our own backyard. So it's not something that like imaginary human rights defenders in like war-torn countries that a lot of Americans tend to think about. Like it's happening to us here.
So there's a lot of stuff in the Online Safety Act that doesn't really have anything to do with protecting children. And it's not even clear that the problems that the act claims to be targeting can be solved through this lens of modern technology. It might make things even worse.
Like, these are all problems that existed before technology. If only porn were to blame, like if only it were that easy, then like I would be on the front of the line saying like, let's get rid of porn.
Right.
But these things are not like, they're symptomatic. And the issues about taking care of young people really is about like harnessing meaningful relationships and capacity building within the family system so that you can talk openly about issues like bodily autonomy, and like, friendship and consent and boundaries. These are things that most parents don't know how to talk about. And actually, they also go to the internet to like seek out resources to be able to talk about it with their family. So instead of providing all families and people with like localized and tangible conditions to build capacity, to have that conversation, to build resilience, and to be able to identify harmful behavior, and to have, lifelines when you're under distress. Instead of doing that, we're like cutting access to all of that. And where kind of tech facilitated aspect comes into it is that, young people feel like they can't raise these questions and talk about this openly in schools or to their families, because nobody will listen to them and nobody will talk about it openly to them.
We know that a vast majority of child abuse is perpetrated by family members or trusted adults, not online predators. We know that children turn to the internet for answers when they don't have adults they can talk to about questions surrounding sex and gender. We know that kids who understand consent and boundaries are much more able to protect themselves from harm. But instead of providing parents with resources to help teach children about those things, or cracking down on the ways in which children are exploited for their data by corporations who actively shape the way that they see the world, the Online Safety Act is a policy of digital abstinence.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die. Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it, promise?
By definition, the Online Safety Act can't really protect children from online harms because it's only interested in detection, not prevention. If this was all about protecting children, Sir Keir probably wouldn't have pushed for budget cuts that were estimated to send 50,000 more children into poverty, at a time when a third of the country's children already experience material deprivation. He wouldn't be cutting education funding, leaving libraries to shutter, and cutting the mental health care portions of the National Health Service.
So, if you're a young person who's, experiencing gender dysphoria and you want to talk about it, you can't talk about it in your family, you can't talk about it in school. So where do you go? It's, online communities. Yeah, exactly. It used to be libraries, and then now you go online and you can find a community and you can find information. So then to kind of take this blunt approach of just removing exposure or access to content because it contains objectionable or, what adults kind of understand to be harmful material is a really heavy-handed approach.
This lack of community is the same reason why misogyny has been so appealing to young boys, especially since 2020 when, there was this little pandemic thing that totally disrupted the lives of children everywhere. Where technology enters the story is that misogyny is boosted by algorithms designed to manipulate their users, exploit children, and farm them for data to sell to the highest bidder.
I would love to see a legislative action that's actually going after curbing the powers of big tech, which is to hit them where it really hurts, which is to address targeted advertising. I would love to see, there's plenty of sociological research about the direct harms of direct advertising on children. Back in the day when we used to have PBS, there were designated hours where advertisers were not allowed to show their ads, or you had to go through a really rigorous process of having experts vet to make sure that the content was child friendly. We don't have something like this.
But instead of addressing any of those issues, the Labour government under Sir Keir is pretty intent on addressing the problem through policing. While the 2024 Labour manifesto does call for 6,500 new teachers, it calls for twice as many new police officers, 13,000, and a £400 million investment in policing, with a mission to crack down on so-called antisocial behaviors like shoplifting and vandalism, despite the fact that almost all police-recorded crime has been declining for the past 20 years. You gotta get those vandals,
Vandals! Another crime.
Even though Keir Starmer admitted in 2023 that the racist, sexist, and homophobic abuses that have run rife in the Metropolitan Police have shattered the trust that Britain's policing relies on and let victims down, he's gonna tell them to try harder this time. I'm sure this time it'll be different, though. Is there anything in the Labour manifesto about holding police accountable? No, of course not. Keir Starmer is a former prosecutor, and like any good prosecutor, he wants to build more prisons. I'm sure that'll protect boys from being radicalized by Andrew Tate online. Instead, they'll be able to get radicalized by him in person when they meet in prison. And this is far from just an issue in the UK. The US Supreme Court just reversed precedent to declare age gating legal, and Senator Marsha Blackburn has proposed the Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA, with the explicit goal of using it to keep kids safe from the harms of critical race theory and gender ideology.
Protecting minor children from the transgender and this culture and that influence. And I would add to that, watching what's happening on social media And I've got the Kids Online Safety Act that I think we're going to end up getting through probably this summer. This would put a duty of care and responsibility on the social media platforms, and this is where children are being indoctrinated.
Ooh, so scary. I hate ideas about gender. They're so scary.
SpongeBob, I see him. He's just standing there, menacingly.
What a bunch of fucking snowflakes, am I right? Child safety was a major reason for support behind the American TikTok ban, even though it only gained steam with lawmakers once they found out that kids were watching the genocide in Gaza on their phones, and we're starting to question our relationship with Israel. Australia has rolled out rules to age-gate search engines, and the EU is rolling out their own age verification measures. All while there is very little oversight on the companies collecting this data and monitoring your web traffic. I think the discourse around adolescence has helped sell these expansions of policing and the surveillance state to the British public, framing this conversation as fighting misogyny or protecting children, while doing very, very little to actually address either of those issues. This would be shocking. You know, if it wasn't a staple of the policing playbook.
Listen, when I ask you one question, I want a fucking serious answer.
All right.
Do you understand?
Yes.
Did you help him get that knife?
For all the talk about misogyny and internet safety that Adolescence has generated, that wasn't the original idea for the show. As creator and writer Jack Thorne revealed in an interview with Big Issue, the original pitch was something about knife crime, with the misogyny part coming much later. You can still see remnants of this inspiration in the final product. Most of the second episode is dedicated to the police trying to find the knife used in the murder.
Do you really think we're going to find a knife here?
We still haven't found the knife. We haven't got the knife.
Now, let's take a second. If you're an American like me, this focus on knives might almost sound quaint or cute to you. Grow up! Use a gun like an adult, I can hear you shouting from the other side of the screen. Again, it can be hard to take British crime seriously from our incredibly violent side of the pond. Whereas we can't stop shooting each other and ourselves with guns, the UK has much stricter gun regulations, which leaves knives as the most commonly used weapon.
I think there's a kind of displacement issue. The control of handguns became that much tighter, they become that much harder to get, and I think there was a bit of a sort of weapon displacement going on. Knives are everywhere. I think you can control guns via the supply side, but you can't do that with knives. Everybody's kitchen drawer has got a fresh stack.
That's Peter Squires, Professor Emeritus of Criminology and co-author of the book Rethinking Knife Crime, Policing, Violence, and Moral Panic?
Yeah, well, knife crime. I mean, it's become a thing. And it means rather more than it should in many ways. There is no offence of knife crime in English criminal law. So when we talk about knife crime, often you find the police are putting a lot of different things together to make a story about prevalence or rise or fall in crime statistics that can tell rather different stories. I mean, we have an offence of wounding, which involves the idea that someone is stabbed with something. It could be a pointed stick, it could be a fork, or it could be a knife.
Perhaps you've heard of the 2024 Southport stabbing, where a 17-year-old attacked a children's Taylor Swift-themed dance event. Or maybe you've heard of the 2019 London Bridge stabbing, where a man taped knives to his wrists and stabbed a number of people at a place called Fishmonger's Hall before he was taken down by someone with a narwhal tusk. Do you see what I mean? It's just hard to take the Brits seriously sometimes. That sounds like a Mad Libs murder mystery. Where do you even find a narwhal tusk? Oh, what am I thinking? Of course, Fishmonger's Hall. I wonder if they wear wigs in there too. Maybe they hide narwhal tusks under the wigs. So-called knife crime has been an even bigger talking point for the police and public safety discourse in the UK since long before Jamie Miller was even born. And I don't think it's an accident that a show originally pitched as something about knife crime has fueled authoritarian expansions of police and surveillance in the name of misogyny and online safety. While Labour's plans for the Online Safety Act are buried in a section about healthcare, the plague of knives is a key part of the party's plan to take back our streets. Stringer Bell put out a documentary earlier this year about knives, and major British publications like the BBC and Telegraph publish multiple stories under their knife crime header each week, counting every ninja sword and zombie knife confiscated by the police. Sadly, they don't keep track of narwhal tusks. Real missed opportunity. They love putting knives and swords on the table so much that I'm a little concerned they're gonna arrest my girl Carly. Browse a few articles about knife crime and you're bound to run into the latest statistics from the Home Office, which showed a near record number of over 50,000 offenses involving a knife or sharp instrument, and a steady uptick in that knife violence since 2010. Well, depending on how you look at it. Because at the same time, both homicides and hospitalizations from assault with a sharp object have been generally declining since the turn of the century. In 2024, there were roughly just 4,000 hospitalizations and 250 homicides from sharp objects in all of England and Wales. You'll also notice that these numbers are all raw totals. They don't take population into account at all. While 2024's 3,900 hospitalizations are only slightly lower than 2001's 4,531, the population of England and Wales increased by nearly 10 million people over that same time span, meaning that decline is a bit more significant than it might look at first glance. Meanwhile, the percentage of robberies, assaults, rapes, and homicides that involve a knife or sharp object have been pretty stable over the last decade. There just isn't all that much to suggest that this is a growing problem.
Yeah, the perceived trend. But bear in mind, the perceived trend is a construct of police activity. Right. I mean, part of what I've said already, by introducing aggravated knife crime, their own activities can escalate the apparent extent of the problem. There's a lot of societies with much more knife crime than the UK, but they make much less of it.
And as I mentioned before, this is in line with broader trends in UK crime, with things like overall theft, homicide, robbery, and violence all having steadily declined over the past 20 years. But while the definition of knife crime is kinda squishy, the public perception of the issue is anything but. As Peter Squires' co-author Elaine Williams wrote in a related article, when knife crime is mentioned in Britain, it will likely be assumed that we are talking about a type of crime that is distinctly youthful, that this is a problem located in the inner city, particularly London, and that this crime type is characterized by youth culture disproportionately represented by Black or Asian young people. Williams notes that two high-profile murders in the early 2000s helped shape this narrative. First, in 2003, 14-year-old Luke Walmsley was stabbed to death by a classmate, and the news media immediately turned this into a referendum on school safety nationwide. Headlines in The Independent, for example, asked the question, "Is your kid taking a knife to school?" and then answered that question later like this, "Kids carry knives and hammers. They have to look after themselves." 3 years later, in 2006, 31-year-old white lawyer Tom Reese Price was killed with a knife by two Black teenagers on the streets of London. Likewise, that story got national attention, playing up the racial aspect so much that Ian Blair, the police commissioner in London, accused the news media of institutional racism. Just think about that for a second. A member of the London police saw this and thought, it's a little too racist for me. This is an organization that, again, has been found to be institutionally racist. Ring, 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 pot, it's kettle. Together, the stories of Luke Walmsley and Tom Price combine to create an image of young people of color preying on the good white children of England. And this perception remains true today. Just check out this clip from Idris Elba's 2025 knife crime documentary.
I hate to say it, but people think it's a race thing.
Exactly.
You know,
that was the first thing that came out when Harry was killed, was I bet it was a black person. I bet it was a black person. And it wasn't. It was another white boy.
There is such a general perception about this whole thing that knife crime just affects Black and brown communities. And it's just so disheartening because it's like no one really cares to really understand it.
There's a massive sudden discourse on knife crime. They talked about it as an epidemic. It was growing, it was relentless, it was linked to the sort of whole adolescent disrespect issues that young people were out of control, they were feral, they were being excluded from schools because of behavioural issues and then left to wander the streets and deal drugs, stab one another, a whole load of kind of postcode area-based gang affiliations that were fighting one another for turf. So that all these factors kind of were part of the story, but the very specific issue of knife crime seemed to be reserved for that kind of street gang type violence that was often black. And the victim was often black. If, as you might have seen in the start of the book, I talked about a whole load of knife-related stabbings and killings, often by older men, by women, by men killing their partners. They weren't called knife crimes.
Despite the fact that kitchen knives are literally everywhere, we simply do not see this narrative backed up by data. People under the age of 18 make up less than 1/5 of both knife possession offenders and hospitalizations, and children are far more likely to be killed by a parent than another young person. While the image conjured by knife crime narratives is one of racial minorities killing white people on the street, as was the case with Tom Price, knife crime usually takes place within communities, between people who know each other, like most violent crimes. Now, Adolescence explicitly ditches the racial element of knife crime, thank God. But they certainly keep the fundamental fear of young people and the reliance on police to solve the issue.
The demonization of young people that went along with that, I think, certainly in the UK, sort of really powered a real, almost meteoric rise in legislation to control this, to prevent that, to stop that, to criminalize this. You know, the 3,000 new offences were introduced during the term of the Blair government. That is hyperactive criminalisation, if you've ever heard. And I think that the sort of gang thing and the knife thing kind of come out of it in a way. It points to a distrust of youth. It points to a sort of failing to tackle the underlying issues of marginality, lack of opportunity, the collapse of youth labour markets, all of that stuff.
Right.
The Generation X stuff that they talked about back then.
Right.
So kids with nowhere to go, no futures, living in awful environments, the whole austerity of their neighbourhoods. So I think, what do we do here? And how do we demonise young people for who they are forced to be to get by?
But it doesn't stop there, because this is all remarkably similar to another media-created panic from the 1970s. In his book, Policing the Crisis, cultural theorist Stuart Hall outlines how, in 1972, British media adopted the term mugging from the States, a term that had been explicitly racially used to describe crime committed by black people, despite not really being a legal distinction. As Hall writes, the police, reacting to these events spurred on by a vigilant press, by public anxiety and professional duty, took rapid steps to isolate the virus and bring the fever under control, which took form in plainclothes police units, harsher sentences, and an increased policing of black communities under the heading of getting tough on crime. But despite the adoption of a new term, mugging implying a new crime wave, statistics from the police themselves indicate that this was neither particularly new in 1972 nor sudden. It was nearly as old as this century. In statistical terms, it was, temporarily anyway, past its peak. Nor when compared with earlier trends was it especially alarming. In other words, the news media created a narrative of rising crime completely divorced from any kind of data or evidence. And it's something you can see on full display in today's knife crime discourse. Take this article in The Telegraph, titled, "Your Right to Feel Crime is Spiraling Out of Control," where the author straight up denies official statistics because they don't feel true to him. He's an apparent empath who just spends too much time on Facebook. Fighting knife crime has been a major part of the Labour Party's 2024 manifesto, calling it a national crisis, and blaming conservatives for letting offenders off the hook, promising a law and order approach led by police. But the police have been waging a war on knife crime since at least 2008, when the London police began conducting unlimited stop and search operations, increasing them by 6-fold.
There was a new offence introduced, a new police power, rather, introduced, so that if the police felt that violence was imminent on the basis of evidence, they could apply to have a kind of basically unlimited stop and search power. Normally they don't do that, and they have to specify a reason why they're stopping you and what they think you've got as contraband. Right. But when they got what was called a Section 44 permission, it's area based, it lasted for 72 hours, they could pretty much stop anyone for anything at any time without a reason.
I'm sure that was applied very
absolutely, yeah.
These stops were unsurprisingly used to target black people. In 2007, black people were 4.1 times more likely to be searched in London than white people. And just a year later, after the war on knife crime began, that number ballooned to 9.7 times more likely. Knife crime again became a topic of conversation around 2014, which just so happened to coincide with the police adopting tasers. Because it's always easier to sell the public on more toys for the police when they're reading about violent crime every day. Now, this is not to say that knife crime is a made-up issue. There are real victims, and many of them are young people. But these communities need investment and support, not more policing. The UK has been experiencing a cost of living crisis since the pandemic, and historically, many of these hotspots of violence occur in poor and neglected neighborhoods, with police often only stepping in once they start to gentrify in order to punish poor people and communities of color.
Temi Moali runs a project in North London helping provide opportunities for young people. She believes stop and search is ultimately counterproductive.
It is an intergenerational issue. Stop and search didn't just pop up 5 years ago. This has been an issue for particular communities, especially the black community, for decades. And so we can't take it out of context. A police officer may say that they're not intentionally stopping young black people, but this is the context that we've got, this is the history that we've got. It cannot be detached from that.
Adolescence is at its heart an expression of fear of young people, of what they're doing on their phones, of their growing independence, and of the mistakes they will make.
Safety is conflating the difference between risk and harm. Actually, a big part of being a teenager, again, back to that idea of like fuck around and find out, is about like learning to pick up and navigate risks. That's actually such an important part of teenage years. If you don't know how to navigate risk, those are one of the most valuable things that you're learning. And
the show and the discourse it's generated have offered some education, sure. But rather than advocating for more resources, that energy has mostly been used to push policing, surveillance, and digital abstinence. Adolescence makes you afraid of knife crime, even though it's a topic that seems to come and go from public discourse whenever police, prosecutors, and prison wardens want something. The show makes you afraid for the state of boys, at a time when patriarchy is being reinforced and upheld by a court and police system that ignores and actively commits violence against women. The show makes you afraid of the state of the internet, raising the specter of 0 to 100 killers and offering mass surveillance that immediately seeks to punish political others under the pretext of protecting children. It's important to realize that police, prosecutors, and other punishment bureaucrats don't just capitalize on these panics, but actively need them in order to justify themselves. There is ample evidence that social investment in things like healthcare, housing, education, libraries, after-school programs, childcare, and mental health infrastructure are far more effective at preventing crime than policing or prisons. But in the face of fear, even the most evidence-based people will likely think that social investment will take too long to cause the necessary changes, and that a police response will be more immediate, even if maybe it's less effective in the long run. Media creates a fear, and the police present an easy solution to it. And that's how they get you. Oh, hey! You surprised me there. Here I am, editing this video, and honestly, I'm getting pretty peeved. Like, yeah, it's great Adolescence is talking about misogyny or whatever, but not if it's just gonna steer the conversation into moral panic territory. I'd give just about anything to watch a show that didn't do that. A show where we could just commiserate over the horrors of misogyny without making it about the police. Oh, what's that? There is such a show? It's called Amy's Dead End Dream House, and it's streaming exclusively on Nebula?
How much of our conscious thoughts currently have already been shaped by living in a misogynist society? But like, without misogyny, what is my personality? No, free. That's what we are. Free, okay?
Amy's Dead End Dreamhouse is a new series from creator Maggie Mae Fish that follows Amy and her apartment full of appliances as they encounter all kinds of adult problems. From mental illness to job hunting to your guy friends getting red-pilled. Turns out life can't really be solved in under 20 minutes, even with commercial breaks, which is weird because advertisers usually solve all of my problems. How else would I know what useless shit I should buy to fill the emptiness growing inside of me? One of the most recent episodes of Amy's Dead End Dreamhouse is about a lot of the stuff we talked about today, fighting misogyny, and just how hard it can be to call your friends out on it.
From one punk rock down on their luck feminist to another, you can't just explode a guy friend for being a misogynist. I wish you could, that would be really funny, but that's not the answer. You gotta try talking to him first. Then you can explode him for legal reasons.
I love the tone that this show strikes between the nostalgia that we all get while watching the kid shows of our childhood and a clear-eyed vision of the world that kicked our asses the second we grew up. And this episode really digs into misogyny in a way that is honestly way more concise than this gigantic video essay you're still watching.
I mean, they must realize the irony of insisting that they're big and powerful while sounding so shrill and whiny. Pussy-ass weak.
Seriously, why didn't I write it like that? You can stream Amy's Dead End Dreamhouse exclusively on Nebula, a streaming service owned and operated collectively by creators. And it has a ton of other exclusive content on it as well, from FD Signifier's interviews with white and white-passing people to Broey Deschanel's exploration of taboo scenes in film like cannibalism and obscenity. Nebula is becoming the answer to the question, how do you make art and content that is as high quality and interesting as traditional media without the corruption and exploitation associated with that industry? Seriously, I think it's really easy to lose yourself while browsing through what is essentially Netflix for video essays. And with my link below, it comes out to just $3 a month. I think almost all of us spend more for a single cup of coffee these days. And Nebula, it won't make you shake with uncontrollable anxiety. It depends on what you watch, I guess. There's definitely some anxious content on Nebula, like mine. And hey, you can consider a lifetime membership too, which directly supports me and other creators on Nebula. Buying a lifetime membership is the most cost-effective way to get long-term access to the exclusive content on Nebula. You get guest passes you can hand out to friends and family, and a portion of your subscription directly supports me, your favorite creator. So, if you want to inject some whimsy into our modern-day hellscape, why not check out Amy's Dead End Dreamhouse, a show that tries to find hope and humanity without trying to gaslight you that everything's really fine. And if you're still watching, thank you so much. Please share, please like, please subscribe. You can check out the Copaganda book club. Right now we're reading, you're never gonna believe this, we're reading a book called Copaganda. It's by Alec Karakatsanis, and he's actually going to be joining us for the September 24th meeting. So that's pretty cool. And yeah, it's free. You can just join. You can support the channel by joining Nebula or by joining my Patreon. There you'll get the full interviews with Kate Sim and Peter Squires. You get mailbags and monthly roundups of all the TV I'm watching. There's debriefs on all of the stuff that I cut from the video that's kind of freeform, but you know, there's a lot of stuff that gets cut and people wanna know for some reason. And we're also doing some live streams, you know, we might do Generation Kill, we might do some other stuff. That'll probably pick up again in mid to late September. So yeah, patreon.com/skipintro, nebula.tv/skipintro. It's a skip intro paradise.